Hey everybody, it's Mr. Lutz, looking to tackle a little bit about feudalism in Europe today, and I think we'll also do the Mongols back to back. So we're going to round off our Unit 2 theme of states and empires with the remaining notes that we've got here. So where we'll start is by talking about feudal England. We'll do a really quick comparison on France, and then I'll just move through a little bit of an explanation on what's going on with the Mongols, and that'll lend itself to what we're doing in class for the next couple of days. So where we start with feudal England is going to be with the fall of the Roman Empire. And honestly, that's about as far back as we've gone in class so far this year. We're not going to get into much of the Roman Empire. I think all you really need to know with the Roman Empire is that it created a lot of stability and order for the people of Western Europe, especially for the people of England, too. And so after the Roman Empire falls, government structure and order and organization is going to break down alongside of it. So after that fall of the Roman Empire, you have all these different kingdoms throughout the land of England that are controlled by people who are known as the Anglo-Saxons. So they are people who come from modern day Germany, but migrated into England in the 5th and 6th centuries. So basically after the fall of the Roman Empire. So in the coming centuries, in that region of the world, you've got the Vikings invading and plundering all these local and relatively foreign lands for wealth. And some of those Vikings are going to not be able to succeed. Some of them are going to be able to succeed. And over time, Viking people, known as the Normans, and the Anglo Saxons are going to start to really kind of merge together, and that's gonna come through with one Norman in particular from 1066, a guy named William, who will later on be known as William the Conqueror, who will come from northern France and will invade England. He wins a battle at the Battle of Hastings, and he takes control of England and establishes it as a feudal nation. So what we should focus on with William the Conqueror is that he starts to organize the country in a really, really more stable way, in a more uniform way. And we'll look more at what feudalism is in class than we will here. But for right now, these are kind of the things you should focus on for William. So he creates this survey book called the Domesday Book, where he figures out who owns all the land throughout all of England as of 1086. And from there, he's going to grant land to a lot of the Normans who helped him overthrow the English, approximately 200 of them. And in exchange for that land, these lords are going to pledge their loyalty to William. And so this helps create this feudal system where, to put it in a short and sweet manner right now, you have a king who grants land to the lords below him. In exchange for getting that land, the lords are going to give their loyalty to the king. And that's going to create some stability. And that's kind of the gist of feudalism for right now. But again, we'll get into more detail with it in class. So after William the Conqueror, about close to 100 years later on, you have King Henry II of England, who's going to marry Eleanor of Aquitaine. I think you guys can see my mouse. Aquitaine being this region down here in modern day Western France. What that's going to allow him to do then is merge some English territory with French territory. And you see this area of light orange in England and in France, and even a little bit in Ireland as well. That's all territory that's under the governance of England during the time of Henry II. Um, he's going to start to exert more control over local regions, so he's going to be able to collect taxes, help settle lawsuits in various regions of his country, punish crimes. This time is when juries start to emerge in English courts, and something gets established that's called common law, which is just basically we have one law system in common, and that's going to be the law of the land throughout all of England. So it does say there, by the way, feudal England behind my little picture over here. Feudal England, patterns of decentralization. So with Henry and with William, you start to see England becoming more organized, that a central government can exert its power over the rest. But with King John, who's Henry's son, you're going to see that centralization kind of collapse and it becomes decentralized, meaning the people on the fringes have a little bit more power. So King John is going to lose control of what's called Normandy, which is an area in northern France. If I back up here, you can see Normandy is right there, kind of just across the English Channel in France. So John loses control of Normandy. They don't like his ruling style there. He raises taxes. He threatens to take control away from local governments. And he's just creating more problems for himself. And he's really frustrating the nobles who he needs to support him. Because remember, he does give them land and they do give him loyalty, but there's a two-way system here that the king can't just exert all the power he wants over everybody and expect all people to fall in line. So John's nobles, like it says here in the middle, they're going to eventually revolt and they're going to force him to sign what's called the Magna Carta in 1215. And the Magna Carta is basically going to give some rights back to the people of England and take some rights away from the king. So these people can't be taxed without having representation in government. If they're going to be put on trial, then there should be a jury of their peers to decide their guilt. And they're going to get protection under the law. They can't just be subject to whatever the king's in the mood to do to them that day. And the nobility maintains its feudal rights. So this really works overall more than anyone else for the nobility. And John's successor, who comes after him, Edward I, creates the first parliament. And parliament, in this sense at least, is going to be when elites from all over England come to a decision on how to raise taxes throughout the country. And they're going to continue to meet and consult the king in this manner well through 1400. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later on this year. So the theme from this slide is that the king is not able to exert all the control all over the country that he wants. He's got to give some power back to his nobles in order to continue to have their support to rule. So moving over to France. After the collapse of the Roman Empire, you have what is called the Frankish kingdom, who is led by their king named Charlemagne. And Charlemagne does a really good job of establishing control over the region. He's going to create what's called the Holy Roman Empire, which isn't quite a political strong unit like it seems to be. And that's even more so the case after he dies. Because once he dies, it's going to be crumbling up between his successors, and they're going to fight over control. And when his last successor dies, a guy named Hugh Capet is going to take control of France. They're going to really just control the area around Paris, though. That gives them control over the region, but they really don't have much power beyond that other than just controlling trade routes. Now, Philip II is going to have some stronger power, but he's also going to struggle to kick Henry II of England out of the country because, remember, that's the one who's going to expand his power through there. However, with King John, that one who loses Normandy, well, this is the time during Philip's reign when he loses Normandy. And it's at this time during Philip II when the French king becomes stronger than he really has been in a very long time. He has, for local government administration, people called bailiffs who go throughout the region to collect taxes and help manage the affairs for the king. And you have what's called the Estates General. But what happens with the Estates General, the king basically consults them. He asks questions of them. They give him advice from their perspective. You can see the three different groups here. Church leaders, the great lords, and the commoners. Church leaders of the first estate, great lords of the second estate, the commoners, wealthy landlords and merchants all fall under the third estate. So they can give their opinions on different things, but the king doesn't have to listen to their opinions. So they never become independent like Parliament does, where they can limit the king's authority. They're always kind of just like, hey, do this, and the king can basically say, that's okay, and that's the way it has to be. So that's really it for feudal Europe. Moving on to the Mongols now. The Mongols, we're talking further to the east in Eurasia. They're going to be originating basically modern-day Mongolia, the grasslands out here where my mouse is kind of circling right now. So they're pastoralists. They don't have agriculture, meaning they don't just grow their food in one spot and then just settle down and stay right there. They're living off of the goods produced by their herded animals. They're trading with agricultural societies. But the key thing is they're living off what their herded animals produce, meaning those animals need grasslands to feed off of, so they're going to follow their animals. So they're going to be nomadic people moving around constantly. Um, to help them move around constantly, they're going to be on horseback primarily. Um, so the Mongols, though, prior to a guy named Genghis Khan, who we'll talk about in a minute, it's a term that loosely describes all these different groups of people. You'll remember this term clan from our time spent talking about Islam before the time of Muhammad, and even during the time of Muhammad. So with clans, all the members of that clan descend from a common ancestor. And some clans will join forces with others for military forces, but most of the time they're really just organized by clan. Trading with others, maybe raiding other clans, maybe working with other civilizations, but no larger Mongol unit prior to Genghis Khan. So before he's Genghis Khan, he's known as Temujin, and his efforts are going to be driven towards unifying the Mongol clans from that point which he becomes known as Genghis Khan, which means universal ruler. So he is going to go out through Eurasia and conquer and destroy cities throughout Central Asia, and they're going to move into controlling Russia, Ukraine, China, Iran, Iraq. They're going to really be in a large expanse of Eurasia during the life of Genghis Khan. And why they're able to do this? They have a really, really capable military. They're really clever with their battle tactics, and they're really capable on horseback, which that's an advantage against an agricultural society that doesn't spend their time on horseback all the time. They're not going to be able to compete with these armies that operate on horseback. They're also willing to engage in really cruel, barbarous acts of destruction and murder and rampages that are just brutal, absolutely brutal. But the point is that it creates a climate of fear throughout the region, so that if you know the Mongols are coming, then your best bet is to probably lay down your arms and just to surrender, which happens a lot. So the empire becomes massive. And you can see on this map, one slide back, how massive it gets. I mean, we're talking all the way out to modern day Iraq, to China, into Korea, into Russia. It's a huge territory. So big that after Genghis Khan's death, it's going to get divided into 4 different khanates. So how do they govern? How do they actually control the people that they conquer? So sometimes they just destroy these places, never for those places to really get back on their feet. And that helps them, because if they were to get back on their feet, there is the threat of redemption. There is the threat of payback that could come. Um, but they'll attack irrigation systems, they'll attack food supplies. But in other times, like the case in point with Russia, they don't really try to govern and take over. They put people into positions where they can collect taxes on behalf of the Mongols, and they just make sure that they get their money. But in places like Persia and in places like China, they're going to try to have to figure out how to govern. But a lot of times, what you're going to see, like in Persia, they leave that government structure that was already there kind of sort of pretty much in place, and just make sure that those people who are ruling there rule in favor of the Mongols. But with China, it's a little bit different. They don't want Chinese culture influencing them and changing their way of life, so they're going to bag all the stuff that we talked about with the Tang and the Song dynasties of China, because they're the ones who destroyed the Song dynasty. They're going to throw out all that Chinese political culture that we had emphasized with the civil service examination system and the bureaucracy, and they're going to make sure that it's Mongols running the show or some other ethnic group that they know they can control to govern China on their behalf. So finally, the Mongols, as brutal as I kind of made them out to be, and they were, to be clear, they do create an atmosphere throughout Eurasia of peace because people feared betraying the Mongols. So what that allows for is it allows for the return of overland trade across Eurasia to emerge again during this time called the Pax Mongolica. So you'll have goods being exchanged during this time, of course. but inventions as well. Some of the stuff coming out of China during the Song Dynasty will start to make its way out and into the rest of the world. But also the exchange of disease will happen at this point. This is where we'll get into the bubonic plague or the Black Death that will help bring the Mongols down in some places. Religion is going to continue to spread throughout Eurasia, especially Islam, but Christianity as well and Buddhism will appeal to the Mongols. But if the Mongols are going to convert to a religion, the ones that do typically convert to Islam. But the Mongols will eventually come to an end after their glory time period of about 100 years. By the mid 1300s, they're just going to have too big of an empire. That's going to create economic problems for them, too much money to spend. Their militaries are getting defeated. They're just really stretched thin, and the plague's going to crush them as well. So that by the mid 1300s, that's going to be the end of the Mongols. So in terms of states and empires, that's really all that we've got for right now. So again, England, patterns of feudalism and centralization, followed by some decentralization. With France trying to centralize a little bit, but especially considering the Estates General, that government holding on to power, that king holding on to power and only listening to the Estates General when he feels like it. And then the Mongols, using brutality and violence, but also borrowing cultural traits and values from other people and tolerating those differences, and allowing for these exchanges to happen and helping to facilitate these exchanges as well. Those are kind of the big things here. So that's it for now. Yeah, more to come in class. Till then, I'll see you later, everybody.